Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes. And the date isn't really important for this video because it's actually a two-parter. I started shooting this video when I was down in Port Dickson, and then I ran out of time, so I had to stop recording, and I didn't really have a conclusion to the video. Now I'm in Kuala Lumpur, and I'm just going to film the ending of this video. So it's actually spread out over 2 days. And in this video, I'm talking about YouTube travel videos from Bangladesh. Because I was talking about videos from Bald and Bankrupt when he was traveling through the Darien Gap, and I've been talking about his videos over the last couple of BTS videos. And then I noticed that he was also in Bangladesh before he went to the Darien Gap. And I've also been to Bangladesh, so that was really interesting for me to watch Bald and Bankrupt's videos from Bangladesh and contrast them with the videos that I shot. And that's what this behind-the-scenes video is all about. So, without any further ado, here is the beginning of the behind-the-scenes video, and then I will tack on an ending at the end. The other topic on my mind this morning, for me is quite an interesting one, is another video from Bald and Bankrupt. I recently did kind of a deep dive into his videos from the Darien Gap, where he's hiking along the migrant trail from Venezuela to the United States, and he went through the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia. And he did that with another YouTuber, Timmy Carter. So I've been watching his videos and Timmy Carter's videos about that journey as, you know, they've been posting them. And then I was looking at Bald and Bankrupt's channel, which is kind of interesting. I really wish I could see Bald and Bankrupt's life behind the scenes, where, I mean, here are his videos. I'm looking at them and looking at the dates when they were published and the places where he was. And I find it so interesting in terms of how he got from here to here and what was he doing in between those times. Because a lot of it, you know, it really doesn't make any sense to me. So just looking back over the last year or so, there's a video from Afghanistan. It says 1 year ago, you know, visiting the world's most dangerous country. Ton of YouTubers make that video now. Very popular, 6 million views. And then right after Afghanistan, he's suddenly in Japan. So 1 year ago, Afghanistan. I don't know how many videos he shot in Afghanistan. It looks like only one. So he went all the way to Afghanistan, shot one video, and then left. How did that work out? I'd like to know. I haven't watched that video yet. And then suddenly, 11 months ago, he was in Japan. And he visited one city in Japan, inside Japan's failed city. So one video from Japan, 3 million views. And then 11 months ago, suddenly he's in Vietnam. One video from Vietnam. And then suddenly he goes into Laos. One video in Laos. And then out of nowhere, he's in, I believe he's in Peru. So somehow he ended up shooting one video crossing the border from Vietnam to Laos. And then 2 months later, 9 months ago, he's in Peru. So like, what happened in those 2 months? How do you end up going from Laos, where you shoot one video, and now suddenly you're in Peru? I think he shot one video in Peru, and then there's 2 in the Amazon. I haven't watched any of these videos. So 8 months ago, he was in the Amazon rainforest. I don't know what country he was in. And then suddenly he's in Colombia. That was 8 months ago. One video in Bogota. That's it. Then 7 months ago, he's in Venezuela. One video in Venezuela. And then 2 months later, he's in Mongolia. So he went from, yeah, whatever. He was in Venezuela, and then like 7 months ago, and then 5 months ago he's in Mongolia and shot like one video there, maybe, yeah, just one video in Mongolia 5 months ago. And then 3 months goes by, and 2 months ago he posted a video from Bangladesh, and he posted 3 videos from Bangladesh 2 months ago, and then just a few weeks ago suddenly he's back in Venezuela, right? And I'm just like, how does that happen in anybody's life? How in the world did he end up, with months in between, going from Mongolia to, well, from Venezuela to Mongolia, Mongolia to Bangladesh, and then Bangladesh to Venezuela to do the migrant journey? Like, all these months separating them, and going to an entire country and just shooting one video in each country. I don't understand the logistics there, and I don't understand how this all, and I always want to know, because his videos start in the middle of nowhere. Like, there's never any lead up. He's in Bangladesh, and the video, I've watched 2 of his Bangladesh videos so far, and the first one is just all in Dhaka, and I find it fascinating, of course, because I've been to Dhaka. That was kind of my first real YouTube experience, was going to Bangladesh. So I was very interested to see what he did. And his video starts, as they all do, he's just on the streets of Dhaka, and he throws in a couple of little hints about what's going on. He says, oh, I haven't slept for 36 hours, and I just arrived here in Bangladesh. And then he dives into his adventures on the street. But again, I'm wondering, okay, you haven't slept for 36 hours. Well, why? You just arrived. Well, where did you come from? Where are you staying? What are you doing in Bangladesh? What are you, he doesn't really give any information about where he came from, where he was, how he got where he was, where he's staying. Nothing at all. It just he just drops you into the middle of Bangladesh. And you can't argue with it from a YouTube point of view, because I'm just walking through the streets of Dhaka, got that video, almost 3 million views. And that video, to me, is actually quite interesting. He has all kinds of adventures on the streets, and he points out a lot of the things that I saw when I was there. He went to get a haircut, which is a classic YouTuber thing to do. He saw all the crazy traffic and the buses. He went down to the riverside, which was what fascinated me about Dhaka, just the river life and all the boats. He went there, and he took a small boat across the river, because right there in downtown, like old Dhaka, this is not new Dhaka, this is like the old traditional part of Dhaka, right on the river. That's where all the river traffic is. It's an amazing place to visit. Blew my mind when I was there. And then right across the river, there's an area like a shipyard. And it's a bit of a combination, but that part in Dhaka is mainly shipbuilding, as he found out. We hear a lot about how Bangladesh has a big industry for ship breaking. There's shipyards, ship breaking yards. I forget what they're called, but ships from all around the world, when they've reached the end of their life, they bring them to Bangladesh and they pull them up on shore, and then all these men pour onto the ship with hammers and welding torches and carve up the boat to get the steel. They're basically recycling the steel, and Bangladesh is famous for these ship breaking yards. And this one in Dhaka is more of a ship building, where they're actually they're working on these derelict boats, but I think they're trying to put them back on the water. So they're hammering on them to break off all the rust, scraping the rust off, repainting them and rebuilding them. But they're also tearing ships down as well to get the spare parts to rebuild the new ships. Anyway, so Bald got on a small river boat, went across, went around there, looked at it, came back, and then he went to a garment area. He met this guy, just a local man who took a shine to Bald, and basically took him to all these places. Says, yeah, I'll show you. And then took him across the river to the shipbuilding yard, took him back, showed him the garment area, big buildings where every single room is filled with sewing machines, and they're all sewing shirts and dresses and things like that for, for export. So he saw tons of interesting things, and it's a very interesting video. But then, more interesting to me, he took one of the big launches. Like, Bangladesh is a country of rivers, and it floods every year with the monsoons. So they've just developed an industry, a lifestyle of getting around the country by boat. And for my money, that's the most fascinating thing about Bangladesh. And when I was there, I went down to the docks all the time. I went to look at the boats all the time. And I really wish I had done more traveling around by boat. Maybe more about that in a minute. But one day, I did go on a day trip. So after one of my trips to the dock, I found out that some of these launches make a daily journey to a town called Chandpur. It's about 3 or 4 hours down the river. So the launch will go all the way down to Chandpur, stop there, and then you could, if you wanted to, of course, spend the night there, and you can get another launch to go further into Bangladesh, or you could turn it into a day trip, which is what I did. I took the launch down to Chandpur. It's a very famous town in Bangladesh for various reasons that I'll also talk about in a minute. And then I got back, I spent some time in Chandpur, then I got back on another launch and came back to Dhaka because I still had a hotel room in Dhaka, and I had all of my, I had all my computers and gear, everything that I was traveling with was I left it in my hotel room in Dhaka, and I just took the boat down to Chandpur and took the boat back up again. So that's what I did. And now I'm watching Bald's video, and this one is called The World's Cheapest VIP Cruise, $12. And it turns out he did the exact same thing. Not only did he go from Dhaka to Chandpur, see Chandpur, and then go back from Chandpur back to Dhaka, not only did he go to the exact same place I did, he took the exact same boat. Like, there's a whole series of boats that go all day long. There's boats that leave every hour. You can just show up at the dock in Dhaka, Shadargat, something like that it's called. And then, you go down to the dock, and then there's all these huge launches. They're the most amazing boats. They're just, incredible things. And then you just get on the next one leaving. And then it's almost like a bus service. These huge launches, every hour, a new one departs, goes down to Chandpur, and then comes back again, and makes the trip. So you could end up taking a different launch each time. But by chance, Bald, he got on the exact same boat I did. I was busy. I had his video open in one window, my video open, and I could compare them side by side just to make sure. Because when he was getting on the boat, I thought, man, that looks a lot like the boat I took. But no, it couldn't possibly be. But then when you dive down into the details, the name of the boat, the actual details of it, like I could put scene side by side, and it's the exact same boat. So we took the same boat. So that made it even more interesting for me to watch his video. So after I watched his video, and I have tons of thoughts about his video, it inspired me to watch my own videos. And to be honest, it was so long ago, and it feels like I've done so much since then, that I'd really forgotten about everything that I did. I mean, I remember the trip. I remember the day and taking the launch. It was one of the most interesting days I've had for the last, 20 years. I would rank it up there with one of the best days of my life. It was such a fascinating thing. And how often in your life do you get to do something like that? I mean, the streets of Dhaka alone are mind-blowing. Just go for a walk in Dhaka and you'll have an experience unlike anything you've had in your whole life. And then go to the docks and just walk up and down the docks and look at the ferry, the boat traffic, the river traffic. It is amazing to see. And then get on one of these launches and go down the river for 4 hours to a small town and back again. It's an amazing experience. It really is. It's something very special to do in your lifetime. So I remember all that, but when I started watching my own video about that experience, it was a complete surprise to me. It was like, what? That's what I did? I don't oh, and then it started to come back to me, but only very slowly. But it was a real eye-opening experience to watch my own videos. I should say that these were the first real videos I'd done. I was like sort of trying to do YouTube for the first time. And I think I was watching a lot of YouTube videos from other people, getting ideas from them. So I had it in my head what you are supposed to do. And I was reading a lot of stuff as well. There are all these, YouTube videos giving you advice. You should do this and should do that. And there was all, about SEO and doing things that the YouTube algorithm finds your video and promotes it. And then you're supposed to encourage people to watch your video all the way to the end. So I came up with this idea when I was in Bangladesh of putting a bonus question at the end of every video, kind of based on the history or geography of Bangladesh. So I'd ask viewers of my video a question and give them an A, B, C, D list of answers. Like, what do you think? Like something to do about the history of Bangladesh. And I ask a question and what is the answer? And then I give the answer at the end of the next video. And I thought that was such a great thing to do. And I was using a camera at the time that was broken, which is I didn't have a GoPro. Like Bald, he was using his X3000 at that time, which is a good camera for this, the stabilization, wide field of view, good audio, relatively good audio, and small and lightweight. I was using the camera I had at the time, which was an Olympus OMD EM5, which I'd had for years and years and years, and I had recently broken it, so the stabilization didn't work. So it was like really kind of jittery. I had a 12mm lens, which is kind of tight. It's a relatively heavy camera to hold. And I had no microphones. It doesn't have a microphone jack. So I could only record audio using the built-in mic of the Olympus, and that wasn't very good. So from a technical point of view, I was struggling a lot with, and I didn't know what I was doing. I felt like I was imitating what I'd seen other YouTubers do. And there were a few moments in the video that were so cringy. I said things that, even at the time, I remember saying them and thinking, well, that's not really my style. I wouldn't say something like that. But I said it in this video because it seemed like you're supposed to hype up your own experience. The worst thing of all, my very first video, I guess I'm down at the dock, standing in front of my boat, and I'm filming myself with the boat, with a launch. The launch is behind me. And I said something about how I'm not really sure what's going to happen. I think I know that this boat goes to Chandpur, and I think it's going to take this long, but I don't really know how to buy a ticket. I don't know where this boat is going to go exactly. I don't know what I'm doing. And then I said, and that's just the way I like it. As if I was putting myself across as some kind of amazing adventurer. It's like we're setting off on this big adventure, and I don't know what's going to happen. Anything could happen, and that's just how I like it. And it's just like, oh, for Pete's sake, it's like so cringy. And I wouldn't normally say anything like that, but I was sort of trying to be a YouTuber, I guess, to a certain extent. And then I said that. It's like the cringiest line ever. But yeah, so that jumped out at me. But then, to my surprise, I didn't remember doing this. I started watching this video, and I thought it was going to be a video about my trip on the launch to Chandpur and back again. And then the video just suddenly ended. I got to Chandpur, and then the video stopped. I was like, what? What about the rest? And then I looked at my next video. It's like, I took my trip, my day trip, and I divided it into 3 videos. So one 20-minute video going down to Chandpur, a 20-minute video in Chandpur, and then a 20-minute video about my return to Dhaka. And I think at the time I did that because everybody said your video can't be long, has to be 20 minutes long. And then I decided to divide it up into 3 20-minute sections. But the whole thing seems so amateurish. It's so badly done. And I had my Olympus and I had my smartphone, and I worked so hard to shoot video on the launch. Like, I tried to film everything that I could. I tried to get what they call coverage and establishing shots. So even while I was, speaking on the Olympus, filming things, I set up my smartphone to shoot time lapses. So I wanted to get all these time lapses of the dock, of the launch, leaving the dock, all the river traffic, the sun rising on the river, going down the river, all the scenery. I shot all these time lapses on my smartphone. So I was mounting my smartphone on this bracket system that I had, attaching it to the railing of the boat, lining everything up, running a time lapse for 30 minutes, and then breaking that all down, moving to another part of the boat, shooting another time lapse. Then I would do the same thing with the Olympus. I would kind of go around and try and capture the interior of the boat. I was trying to get all fancy, which is all well and good. But then when it came to the editing, I guess I did things that I thought were good. Like, I opened the video with some music and a shot of a boat, and then I put this quote on the screen. I went looking for an inspirational quote from a historical figure about river traffic. I put that on the screen, and I made this like introduction. And then when I had the time lapses, I put music over top of the time lapse, and I put together different sections. And the whole thing, though, comes across as a giant mess. Like, I had no idea what I was doing. At the time, I thought it was all pretty good, I guess. But when I watch it now, it's so clunky and unwieldy and awkward. It's like it jumps from here to here, and suddenly it's got music playing, and I'm like, why am I playing music there? It's like, and this, and this, and this, and this. And then when I got to the end of the video, it just ended. And I knew that this was part 1 of a 3-part thing, but for some reason, I don't think I ever said that anywhere. I didn't say part 1 of the video, part 2 is in the next video in which I document this, and this is part 3. I made 3 separate videos, and yet each one is awkward, and I never really connected them into a whole. The whole thing from an editing point of view was just, what was I thinking? Seriously. And I've had that reaction looking back over almost all the videos I put on YouTube. I was talking about that in a recent behind the scenes video where at the time, I think it's good. I was talking about my videos from the Mae Hong Son Loop in Thailand, where I worked just as hard incorporating all these different filming techniques and music and doing this and doing that. And yet the final result is just wrong, And my videos from Bangladesh are exactly the same. I worked so hard on them. I put in so much effort, not just in the filming, but in the editing. And yet it was pretty clear that I really had no idea what I was doing. And that was how I felt about my video. On the positive side, especially now that I can compare it to Bald's video, at least I showed everything. I showed the life of the dock in Dhaka and Chandpur, this stuff that I thought was so exciting and interesting. I showed all of the river traffic, like the time lapse of pulling out from the dock and then going down the river. I shot all the river traffic inside the city of Dhaka, and then we'd go underneath all these bridges, and I was doing like this Apocalypse Now style of filming where I'd be filming ahead, and as the bridge goes by overhead, I'd swing the camera up to follow the bridge and then eventually be filming back behind me where you see the bridge come into view and everything going on at the side of the river. They have these giant brick kiln manufacturing centers all along the river, brick making everywhere with giant kilns and smokestacks. And in the early morning mist, it all looks so dramatic. And I filmed all of the brick kilns. And every time a boat would come close to my launch, I'd film it. People jumping onto the boat from small boats. You know, they have to pace the big launch, and then they jump from one to the other with a basket on their head because they want to sell snacks to the customers. All this activity. I went down to the engine room, filmed the engine room, and I remember the sound of the engine in one of these launches would tear your brain in half. The level of noise was like nothing I'd ever experienced in my life. You know, I filmed people. I filmed the top of the boat, the scenery from up there. I tried to film everything. And then I talked about the name of this river and how it meets up with this other famous river. And then I don't know whether I was right about this or not, but I was talking about how Chandpur was famous because 3 major river systems all converge at Chandpur. So it developed this huge launch dock where all these launches come down from Dhaka, and then you can get off in Chandpur and transfer to another launch to go deeper into Bangladesh in different directions. And I can't remember whether I talked about it or not, but Chandpur is also famous because of a fish. Everybody talks about that. The fish is supposed to be very delicious, but more than that, this fish, let me look up the name of it just to get it right. I think it's called the hilsha. Yes, it's called the hilsha, and it is actually the national fish of Bangladesh. And I knew that at the time, but I can't remember if I talked about it in my video, in my 3 videos. I don't think I did, but I wish I had. And no, here's a paragraph from a Bangladesh website where they talk about it, and they say, Hilsha is a unique product of Chandpur. It is a highly acclaimed and enticing aqua treasure, an asset of immense prosperity and pride. The glamorous silvery Hilsha, the national fish of Bangladesh, is an embodiment of Bengali culture, tradition, and heritage. So this fish is a big deal, the national fish of Bangladesh. And in Chandpur, I knew this, they had a fish market, and I think they called it the largest wholesale fish market in Bangladesh. Oh no, it has the biggest wholesale Hilsha fish market in Bangladesh. The mighty river Padma and Meghna meets there. So Chandpur is quite an important, well-known city in Bangladesh. And when I went there, I walked all the way around Chandpur. I went to the park area, followed the coast. I followed the smaller river through there. I went to the fish market and filmed inside the fish market. I went to all these places. So from a positive point of view, in terms of documenting the journey on one of these launches, the life of Dhaka, the river life, Chandpur itself, my video contained a lot of information and showed everything. So if I had to say something good about my video, it would be that. You know, sure, I worked really hard on it in terms of filming. I did my absolute best, and I shot a lot of video, and I did a lot of hard work in the editing. Of course, all that hard work doesn't mean anything if you don't create something good at the end of it, but at least that hard work is there. I see it. But at the very least, I included a lot of information, a pretty in-depth documentation of this launch journey. So I can say that about my video. And I was thinking, I really wish I could redo it. And now I'm wondering if I still have the raw video. I don't think I do, which is really kind of unfortunate. Like all the video that I've shot in Myanmar, in Sumatra, in Malaysia, in Bangladesh. I can't keep all that video because it's too much, terabytes of video, and I can't keep all of it. I tried to keep as much as I could. I have, all these portable hard drives, two terabytes each, I guess, and they just fill up, and eventually I have to delete everything to make room for new video. I have a vague memory of maybe I kept the video from Bangladesh. It might be in Kuala Lumpur, but I don't think so. I think I deleted it, which is unfortunate because I would love to take the video, my 3-part video, and put it together into one video where I document the whole journey in one video, go down and back, and don't divide it up into 3. I'd love to do that. And I remember when I walked through Chandpur, I filmed a lot, and I was meeting all these people and talking to them, and I would go to the fish market, and I filmed a lot of video inside the fish market, but almost all of that video from Chandpur, I didn't really use it as raw video. I turned off the audio and just used little clips, short little clips, packed a whole bunch of clips together and put music over top of it. So I'm wondering whether I have a lot more video than I used, and now I'd probably include more detailed video segments of the fish market and things like that. In my video, I was focusing mainly on the river life, the dock, mainly parking all these launches. That was amazing because all these launches, huge boats, are fighting for space on the dock, and they're like giant cows getting up to a feeding trough, and they're all like fighting for position to get their heads into the feeding trough, and these boats would just slam into each other and push each other out of the way to make room at the dock. It was an amazing scene, and that's what I spent most of my time talking about, filming and documenting. And then when it came to the walk around Chandpur, I just sort of made a montage about that. But I'd love to get my original video and recut it and make a new video about it. But we'll see. Maybe when I'm in KL, I can track down my old hard drives and see if I still have that video. I may or I may not. I probably don't, but that would be interesting. But anyway, talking about everything in my video, and in particular the things that are good or bad about it, I bring all that up because I wanted to contrast it with what Bald did. The good things in his video and the bad things in his video, and even the good things that seem good on the surface but strike me as relatively negative when you actually break it down. So let's see, how can I approach this topic? Let's find a starting point. I guess a good starting point is to say that Bald's video is clearly better than mine. It's more engaging for a viewer. It's more interesting, I think, for a person to watch. If somebody clicked on his video and clicked on mine, there's a far more likely chance that they'll keep watching his video all the way to the end. He'll keep the attention of the viewer. With my video, far less likely, because it's so awkward and jumps around so much. They don't really know what's going on. So I think someone would click on my video, start watching, and then just like, oh, what is this? And they'll stop. Bald's video, I think people will click on it and just keep watching to the end. And that, he has, I don't know, I think it has millions, his usual millions of views, maybe 2 million for his video. And on the surface, you could say that his video is more interesting because he has so much interaction with local people. A lot of local people interaction, basically, is what I will call it. And I think that's what engages people interest. But, that's a starting point. But then the video as a whole is so different in tone, where he seems to be ridiculing everything he sees and everyone he sees. So, like, this interaction with local people is kind of sticking in my mind right now because I noticed in my video, it's almost all me by myself. There were times, like on the launch, local people came up to talk to me all the time because I've got my Olympus camera, you know, I'm shooting a time lapse, and everybody in Bangladesh is very friendly, and they all came up to talk to me. So I had tons of people talking to me all the time. But I didn't film any of it, partially because with my camera, I couldn't. It's like I've got this big Olympus. What am I going to do? Turn it around and aim it at these poor guys? Or anyway, and I wasn't comfortable doing that. So I had all these conversations with students, with fishermen, with businessmen, all kinds of, well, all men basically, no women, but all these men on the launch. But I don't have any of it on video. And then partially also because our conversations meant nothing. They ask me, you know, where are you from? I'm from Canada. And then we try to have a conversation, but I have no idea what they're talking about. I can't understand, even when they're speaking English, I don't know what they're saying. They don't know what I'm saying, and we end up having this conversation with zero content because, yeah, we can't really communicate because of the language barrier, the accent, I guess. I can't understand their accent. They can't understand mine, even when we're both speaking English. And we're talking about things from different cultural viewpoints. We live in such different worlds. I couldn't really, all these conversations were just on an extreme surface level, and were basically just a long sequence of words going back and forth, but about nothing. And at the end of it, I didn't even know what we were talking about. The miscommunication was that bad. So I think even if I had some of that on video, I had little bits of it on video, I remember, but I didn't put any of it in my video because there was no actual conversation taking place, if you see what I mean. Bald, he has all these conversations, but they're exactly the same as mine. But he kept them in, where he would just talk to people everywhere he's going. He's interacting with people and saying things, but it's totally obvious, like nobody has a clue what he's saying. They don't speak English, and he's shouting at them from a distance. He's saying things in English, but there was no actual interaction because they don't understand him, and they don't actually end up having a conversation. But Bald is comfortable doing that. It's almost like he's doing a stand-up routine, like a monologue as he's walking through the streets. You know, the boat, he'd be on a small boat, and next to him he'd see another boat where all the Bangladeshis are unloading things, and he would shout across to them, you know, hello, how are you? Oh yeah, what are you doing there? And then they don't reply. He's like, okay, yo, businessman, yeah, businessman, good. And then he would be having this ongoing conversation, but it isn't a real conversation because nobody is replying, but he just sort of keeps talking anyway. And even when he's sitting down with people and talking with them, it has the illusion of being a conversation, but the other person doesn't know what he's saying. So there is no actual conversation taking place. You know, he went to this, when he was in Chandpur, he kind of dismissed Chandpur. He just says, there's nothing here. It's not interesting. He talks about that a lot in his video, which again is a big difference between his and mine. For me, that boat ride and going to Chandpur blew my mind. For me, it was like an amazing experience, and I was fascinated by everything I saw at every stage. Bald, he got on the boat in Dhaka. He showed his cabin. He was with another YouTuber, Backpacker Ben. He tracked down Backpacker Ben, and there's a little segment where he's sitting with Backpacker Ben, and a group of Bangladeshi men were standing in a circle looking at him. And then Bald kind of made a joke about it. He was filming himself and says, well, if you're socially awkward, Bangladesh is not the country for you because everybody is going to be staring at you all the time. And he turned his camera around and showed like 10 men, young and old, standing in a semicircle just looking at him. and then he kind of joked around with them. But again, they had no idea what he was saying. So he filmed that, and then he filmed nothing else. I think he filmed the launch, pulling away from the dock, and then the video jumps ahead to arriving in Chandpur. So the entire river journey that was so fascinating to me, I think he just spent the entire time resting in his cabin. So he didn't film any of the river traffic, any of the boats. He didn't talk about the rivers. He didn't show the shoreline, all the brick kilns, all the brick making operation, the shipyards, all the amazing river traffic around the city of Dhaka in particular. He didn't really film any of it. He basically I think he just stayed in his cabin the whole trip. So like 3 hours later, as the launch arrived in Chandpur, then he came out of his cabin and he filmed and didn't show anything else. So that's a big difference between our videos. And then when he was in Chandpur, he kind of just ridiculed it the entire time. Like when he was in Dhaka, he said something like, yeah, I don't know where this boat's going. It's going to Chand something. And then when the launch got there, he went up on deck and he started filming again. And he said, we're arriving in Chan whatever. So he still didn't even know the name of where he was going. He hadn't bothered to commit to memory even the name of the city that he set out to visit. And then he spent, however many hours in Chandpur, probably not that very long, spent an hour or two there. And then he got back to the dock. And then he's, meeting up with backpacker Ben again, and they're getting back on another launch to go to Dhaka. And then he said something about, so that's it for my visit to Chan something. Even after the entire day was over, he still couldn't even be bothered to learn the name of the city he was in, which I find puzzling and very different from my approach to things, I guess. And when he was there, he just sort of dismissed it. For me, it was all about the boat ride. Like just the chance to get on a launch and go down the rivers of Bangladesh, that to me was the hook. That's what I was interested in. And Chandpur itself was just a bonus. I mean, the boat has to land somewhere. And when I decided to go on this trip myself, I wasn't really thinking about Chandpur. I wasn't thinking, I really must go to Chandpur. No, I was thinking I just want to take a boat. And then the boat happened to go to this place called Chandpur. And I wasn't focused on that. But of course, once I got there, I found it to be quite an interesting place. But then Bald kept, I guess he was thinking he was going to go somewhere interesting. The boat ride obviously really meant nothing to him because he didn't film any of it. He didn't really care about all the river traffic and what he was going to see along the way. He was focused on the destination. He knew that a lot of Bangladeshis take boats to Chandpur, so he thought, wow, it must be an interesting place. And as he puts it, he's looking for content. He's very sort of breaking the fourth wall when it comes to that. He said that when he was in Dhaka previously, he says, in Dhaka, there was tons of content. He was talking about, going across the river to the ship breaking yards, going to the garment factory, going to the barber shop, seeing all the buses. He just sort of wandered around the streets. And as he put it, there was content everywhere. I got all this content, all this great content for YouTube. And then he says, Chandpur, there's no content here. There's nothing for me in Chandpur. And he kept kind of making jokes about it. He says, these people keep telling me it's famous for its fish. I don't know, fish. And he said several times that he wouldn't dare eat any of this fish. He doesn't want to eat anything. He talks about all the pollution in the river and how he wouldn't dare touch any of the fish coming out of the river. In fact, he talked about how he didn't dare eat in Bangladesh at all. There was one point when he was down at kind of a riverside park area, and again, he was standing there going like, this is all? Like, this is what I came all the way from Dhaka to see, why did I even come to this Chanda, whatever it is? And then there was a little guy, there's like a food stall selling some kind of a local drink or a snack, and they called out to him, and he said to them, he said, I'm not drinking your water. My God, no meningitis today. No, thank you. And I think he was willing to say that because he knew they wouldn't understand him. I mean, technically, he was insulting them. He was insulting Bangladesh in general. And I don't think he would have said it if he thought they knew what he was saying. But as I said, he does all these conversations with local people where he's really talking to the viewer of his YouTube channel. He's not really having a conversation with local people. So this guy called out to him and says, oh, we have some snacks here. Do you want to try something? And then he says, I'm not drinking your water. My God, no meningitis today. No, thank you. And again, it's kind of insulting, kind of ridiculing this poor guy. And there was right in that same spot, there was in a small amusement park for children, like a playground with, teeter-totters and swing sets, and something that had like mock-ups of little spaceships that go around in a circle, and you put your kid in there and they spin them around. And you see a lot of these sorts of parks all over Indonesia and Bangladesh, wherever you go. And then his take on it, he went into the park and basically just ridiculed it again for its lack of safety, basically. He was just making fun of it. And he said, if you had a child that you loved more than anything in the world, a little boy, let's say, would you allow him to go into this and go around in circles held on by a bit of chain? So he's basically making fun of the park about how broken down everything was and how dangerous everything was. Again, just kind of ridiculing it. And that's the overall tone that he kept throughout the whole video. And he knew that would be entertaining for his YouTube audience, because that's really, who he's speaking to. And when he was there making fun of that park, he was at the river, it was a park. And he said, it seems, he says, I don't know what you're meant to do in these places. Apart from look at the river, I could have done this in Dhaka. So again, the whole trip for him was like pointless. It's like, there's nothing in this town, so why am I even here? And then he follows that up. He says, it seems people come here to eat fish and other things by the river. I don't know why. It's a bit grim, because I don't eat in this country. So again, he's just like making fun of the town. And as I remember this park, I went there as well. I saw everything that he saw. And in this park, there's a statue of the big fish, the hilsha, the national fish of Bangladesh. And it's a big silvery fish, and there's a statue of it. And he points it out as again, it's like, yes, this is why this town is famous, this fish. And there it is. And he doesn't know that it's the national fish of Bangladesh. He just doesn't know anything about it. And again, he makes fun of the people of Bangladesh, like, why would they come all the way to this town just to sit here on this park and get meningitis? Basically, that was his attitude. But again, people of Bangladesh, they probably, if they make the journey from Dhaka to Chandpur, they're probably on their way to somewhere else. Get on another launch and then continue on their journey. Or if they're coming to Chandpur for the day, well, it's a fun outing for them to get on a riverboat, go down to Chandpur, get out of Dhaka, go to the Riverside Park where there's fresh air. And it's famous for its local fish, famous food, so they try some of the local famous fish. And they hang out with friends and family and have a good day together in the park, and then they get back on the boat and go back to Dhaka. It's just a family outing. It's an outing for friends, and it's just life in general. But he couldn't let go of this thing that this town wasn't giving him the content that he was looking for. So coming to Chand whatever, Chand something, he still couldn't come up with the name. It kind of was a real disappointment to him. Up until this point in his video, he was always in the town of Chandpur, like where the launch dropped him off. And at this point, he sort of gave up on the town of Chandpur, and he decided to take a boat across the river and sort of see what's there. I think he was talking to a local person, and he pointed across the river. It says it wasn't like the main river, because there's two main rivers that meet there, and then there's a third river, a smaller river system. And then he was looking across that smaller river to another coastline. The other two rivers are so big at this point, they're so wide, you can't even see the other side. But on this narrow river, he could see the other side. And he asked this local man, like, what's over there? Like, there's nothing here in Chandpur. There's no content for my YouTube video, but what about over there? And the guy told him there's some kind of a market over there, a bazaar, as he called it. So Bald decided to hop on a local boat, like one of the small ones that go back and forth across the river, and then go over to there and see if he could find any content for his YouTube video on the other side. So he hopped on that boat and he went over there. And then he did something a little bit odd. I'm of two minds about whether it's good or bad, because I find myself in a similar situation all the time. He actually did it 2 or 3 different times. When the launch arrived in Chandpur, he hopped onto one of these bicycle rickshaws. So a man, pedaling a bike to bring him somewhere, like a local taxi. And he didn't tell the man where he wanted to go. I kind of admire that about Bald, and I feel the urge to emulate this side of his behavior sometimes, in that like it doesn't really matter where you go sometimes, and then he doesn't really care that much where he ends up, and I kind of like that adventurous spirit. So anyway, he saw this rickshaw, this bicycle rickshaw, and he just hopped in the back. And he couldn't communicate with the guy. He didn't speak English. He doesn't speak, Bengali, so there was no communication. He didn't like get out Google Maps and say, okay, bring me here. He just sort of hopped in the rickshaw and just let the guy take him wherever he wanted to go. And I guess this guy did a calculation in his head. Okay, white guy, tourist, let's bring him to the park. Like, where do tourists want to go? And most tourists from Bangladesh, they want to go to the park, sit in the park, have a picnic, and try the local fish. So he thought, well, that's probably what Bald wants to do. So he just took him to the park. And then, of course, when he got there, that's when Bald sort of got out of the rickshaw and then looked around and kind of talked about how, like, this is it. I mean, this is what you do in Chandpur. This is where you brought me, because he didn't see anything of interest there. But then he had to pay the guy, and he didn't know how much to pay him because he didn't negotiate a fee in advance, and he can't speak to him at all. And this is something that I could relate to a lot, because I'm always in that situation myself. And to be honest, that feeds into much of why I walk everywhere, because this whole negotiating a price thing is just too much trouble for me. So rather than spend a long time trying to figure out how to communicate with the guy and then talk about how much to pay, and you have all that confusion, I'll just walk. I mean, if it's 3, 4, even 5 kilometers to where I want to go, I'll just start walking. And that's often what I do to avoid this exact situation. Bald, he just hopped into the bicycle rickshaw, but then when he got to the destination, he didn't know how much to pay. So what Bald did, he just reached into his pocket and then he pulled out a big stack of local currency. It's called the taka. And I just looked it up online, and right now it looks to be about 110 Bangladeshi taka to US dollar. So $1 is 110 taka. But he didn't know how much to pay, so he just took out a whole bunch of money and held his hand out to the rickshaw driver and kind of indicated, just take what you need, like whatever this ride cost, just help yourself. And I'm pretty sure he did it just because it's easier. As I said, it's easier than trying to communicate. I've done it myself in the past, not quite the way he did it, but I've asked them, like can you tell me how much it is? And then they just take whatever it is. But he made a joke out of it and made it seem like it was an honesty test. So when he held out all this money, the rickshaw driver, instead of just taking all of it, he kind of fumbled through it and he took some, but then he realized it was too much and he put it back and he took an appropriate amount. So Bald concluded, they're very honest here. Look, he took the appropriate amount. He didn't just take all the money. So he played it as a joke, as kind of an honesty test. And I'm not quite sure how I feel about that. But then he hopped in the boat and he went across the boat. It was the same situation. He didn't negotiate a fee beforehand. He didn't talk about where he wanted to go. He just hopped in the boat and just let whatever happens happen. And he got to the other side and did the exact same thing. He just took out all of his money, held it out to the boat guy and said, just take whatever you think is appropriate. And the guy did the same thing and just took a certain amount of money. And then Bald talked about how, they are so honest here. And then, of course, he couldn't help himself. He ended up insulting the people of India at the same time because he said, if I did this in India, they would just take all the money. If I said to a guy, take whatever you need, he would just take all the money because in India, they're not honest. But here in Bangladesh, the people are so honest, right? So I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. I certainly wouldn't do it in the same way that he did it and make it an honesty test. For me, it's just a way to bridge the communication gap, the language barrier. But I was talking about how he has all these conversations with local people. And I've talked to other people about Bald and Bankrupt's videos, about what makes them so popular. And there's many reasons why they're so popular, but one of them that people often bring up is his interaction with local people. And that's kind of been a theme of my BTS video talking about Bald and Bankrupt's video, because he has all this communication with local people, not communication, he has all these interactions with local people, but there's no actual communication taking place. And when he got across the river, there were quite a few examples of that. So, for example, he was walking down an alleyway and he saw a guy at a pan stall, like pan where they get the betel nut. They put it, in a leaf and put in all the betel nut and all the spices, and you fold it all up and you put it in your mouth and then you sort of suck on it all day long. And that's a very common habit in Bangladesh still. And I'm sure Bald knows that. He wouldn't be looking at this wondering what it was. He's been overseas long enough. He's been to India. He's been all over the place. So he would know exactly what this was. But he spoke like he had no idea what it was. So anyway, he saw the guy buying some pan, and then he stopped with his camera to film him. And then again, he said, I have a quote here. It's like, "You eat? Wow. Go on then. Let's see you." He says, "Let's see you do it. Shove that thing in your gob. Wow. The whole thing. Wow. Crikey. Must be hungry." So he sort of stopped and held out his camera, pointed his camera at the guy, and encouraged him to show him, what is this? What is this? You're going to eat that? And then the guy, folded the whole thing up and put the whole thing in his mouth, which is normal. That is what you do with this thing. You put it in your mouth. It's like chewing tobacco, basically. You put it in your cheek, and then it just sits there for a while, and all the red juice soaks into your mouth, and these guys are spitting out the red juice. And I'm sure Bald knows all that, but he kind of played it off like he had no idea. And then when the guy put the whole thing in his mouth, Bald reacted like, "Whoa, you shove that whole thing in your gob? Incredible, you must be hungry." So again, the guy had no idea what he was saying, no idea why he was filming him. So even though he had this interaction with a local person, there was no actual communication. It wasn't a conversation, and it was insulting. He was making fun of the guy. Shove that whole thing in your gob. Wow, that's kind of weird. That's crazy. So the whole thing was a little bit of an unusual interaction. And later on, he went by a mosque there was a mosque there, and he panned his camera up. It looked like a really interesting mosque, really kind of beautiful. But, rather than find out the name of the mosque, the history of it, how old it is, or do a tour of the architecture, or anything like that, he kind of drew a crowd of people at the entrance to the mosque. And again, this is an example of him interacting with local people. But there was, again, no actual communication take place. He didn't stay long enough to actually have a conversation. He didn't get out Google Translate to try and have a conversation. He just stood there, and there was one man in front of him in particular who he was engaging, and this man was missing most of one hand. I don't know whether it was from birth or an accident. I'm not sure, but he had just a stump. There were no fingers or thumbs anymore. And then Bald was interacting with this man, and the man kind of held out his hand, just a stump, and then Bald kind of held it, and then he was, looking at the crowd of people all around him. And people were saying things. I don't know what they said. Bald didn't know what they said. But then Bald didn't really have a conversation. He was just sort of joking and making small talk. And he was looking at the crowd and the man in front of him who had just the stump for a hand. And then Bald said, I think he said this a few times, like, number one, he was pointing at the man. It was like, number one Muslim, he's the number one Muslim in this town. Number one Muslim, this man here, he's the best Muslim in town. And then everybody was sort of laughing and joking. But again, even though there was this interaction, he wasn't actually communicating with anyone. He didn't know why this guy was holding out the stump of his hand and giving it to him to shake or to hold, or what was going on. He didn't know what any of the people around him were saying. And then he just sort of turned it into a joke. Like he didn't know what to say. It's a very awkward situation, and I understand that. I'm often in that awkward situation myself. But I don't have this ability to joke and laugh and smile. If it's awkward, I feel awkward, and then I don't really know what to do. But in his case, his default behavior is, even though it's awkward and even though he doesn't know anything about what's going on, he'll just talk anyway. And he made this joke. I don't even know what the joke means, but number one Muslim, he's the best Muslim in town. Yes, 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 laughing, and then he eventually left. And he did say in his video, I have no idea what that was all about. Like, I didn't understand any of what was happening there. But he still turned it into a bit of a joke, and this whole, he's the number one Muslim, isn't he? It felt like he was ridiculing the men there, and this man in particular. It didn't feel quite right to me. Maybe I'm just being overly sensitive, but that's how it came across. And eventually he gave up on that side of the river too. He wanted to go to this market. The guy told him there was a bazaar there, but he never went looking for it, or he never found it. He never showed it. He just walked around some of the neighborhoods there, and it was quite interesting, actually. I think he was invited to come back into a residential area, like an alleyway with rooms on all sides, and families were living in all these rooms. And these, people were showing him, the life of the local neighborhood. And that was kind of interesting. But eventually he just gave up on that area too, and he went back to the dock and got in the boat and went back to the main area where the launch dock is. And he had to track down Backpacker Ben, because he and Backpacker Ben just sort of split up. And I assume Backpacker Ben made a video about Chandpur as well. So I'm going to track that down as well. I want to see, what did he shoot while he was in Chandpur. I don't know Backpacker Ben at all. I don't know anything about him or the videos, the style of video that he shoots. I have an idea that he's similar to Bald and Bankrupt and Timmy Carter, kind of doing crazy, wild things. And I think that's the style of videos that he makes, but I don't know that for sure. I'm going to have to track him down. But anyway, he finally went back to hook up with Backpacker Ben. And he was getting into the bicycle rickshaw with Backpacker Ben to go back to the launches. And there was some sort of interaction with local people. And another quote from him, he said, wow, this place had zero content. It's funny. Yesterday we had all that content in Dhaka, but you come here, nothing. That's the unluckiness of the draw sometimes. So yeah, he dismissed Chandpur because it gave him no content for his YouTube video, or at least no content in his terms. Nothing wild and crazy enough happened, but he did, shoot some video there. But then, yeah, he was sort of had this interaction with some schoolboys there, and there was they were trying to speak in English, and then he said to one of the boys as they were leaving, "Study English hard. It's your only chance to get out of this place." And again, that interaction with the locals, it falls into the exact same pattern I'm talking about, where there was really no conversation taking place, and it was a little bit, or not even a little bit, it was a lot of an insult, saying that the only way to feel about this place is to get out. The only way to get out of Bangladesh. He's assuming that everybody wants to get out of Bangladesh. Such an awful place that, man, everybody must be trying to get out. Which is a bit insulting to your host country. And then why, study English. If you study English hard, that will be your ticket to get out of this terrible, awful place. So again, it was like there's actually no conversation, and then he was insulting all of Bangladesh, basically, and assuming that, oh, it's such an awful place that everybody probably wants to leave. And, study English, that's your ticket to get out of this horrible place. And then, as he said, that was the end of his time in Chandpur. And as he said, that's the end of our little journey down to this town, Chandra whatever. That was his conclusion. He still, after all these experiences, all that time, all that interaction with the local people, he still didn't even know the name of the place where he went. So, yeah, I guess that's it. Really interesting for me, as I said, to stumble across his Bangladesh videos, because it inspired me to look at my videos, which I've already talked about. And yeah, half the time, I don't even know what I was thinking. I'm watching the video, and I'm glad I have all the video that I shot. I have no issues with the fact that I shot all these time lapses on the river, the fact that I put music over the time lapses. That's a standard YouTube thing, right? And I have no issue with the video that I shot. I shot video of all of the river life, and both going down river, and then I shot video all the way heading back. I like that. But somehow when I put it all together, like I edited the video and assembled all the parts, it was like I had no clue what I was doing. I didn't have any sense of a flow to the video. As I said, I have 3 separate videos with no real connection between them. I might change the names of them on my YouTube channel, at least to say part 1, part 2, part 3. I didn't even do that back in those days. Why didn't I do that? I don't know. Yeah, and just the way it was almost like I shot all this video and then I didn't know what to do with it because there was no story. I wasn't telling a story. And then I just grabbed bits of video. Oh, this looks interesting, and I put it in. And it's like, oh, I wasn't speaking here, so I guess I'll put music over top of it. And I basically just had a big folder full of stuff that I shot, and then I just dumped it all into the video because I didn't know what else to do with it. So it's pretty bad. And then Bald's video, by contrast, is at least it tells a contained story. Starts, with him at the dock, getting on the launch, goes down to Chandpur. He looks around Chandpur, gets back on the launch and comes back. And I guess the theme of his video was he wasted a day from his point of view. He didn't film the boat ride down. He went to Chandpur. He walked around Chandpur, didn't really like the place, didn't think there was anything of interest there. And then he got back on the boat and went back to Dhaka. So at least whatever you think of the story he told, there was a story. And he just told it in linear fashion from the beginning to the end. You know, there was a beginning, a middle, and a conclusion. And so there was a structure there. And of course, his personality, his banter, his interactions, his jokes, all of that appeals to a certain type of YouTube audience. Millions of them, apparently. So everything worked out pretty well for him from that point of view. So that's it. That's all I wanted to say in terms of a conclusion to my behind-the-scenes video talking about Bangladesh, Bald and Bankrupt's videos, and my video. That's it. Time to start my day in Kuala Lumpur. My life has changed drastically since I moved from Port Dickson up here to KL. And yeah, I've got to get started with my day today. And I'll see you in the next video.